Today we're talking 4-track recording tips and a gear list I made on my website. I've been revamping my website the past couple of weeks to include more 4-track information. I want to make my website into a hub for 4-track, for all things 4-track. And I've started out making this gear list that's all about must-have 4-track recording gear. If you want to check it out, just hit up 424recording.com. One big thing that a lot of people ask me about, and a lot of videos I made early on in the channel, was all about these RCA cables. So we'll talk about those in a minute. But I pretty much tried to cover everything that I think you'll need for 4-track recording outside of a 4-track and tapes, which is something I'm going to include maybe in like an FAQ more toward the bottom. I'm still working this out, so if you have any ideas to make this site better, let me know in the comments. If there's any gear that I missed that you use a lot with your 4-track, let me know and I'll add it. So one thing I use a lot obviously are my monitors. I mean, that's kind of the first thing you're going to need, is at least a pair of headphones. I guess the thing you would need at least is this adapter if you already had a pair of headphones. Obviously you need some way to monitor your tracks on the 4-track, and on the 424 it's a 1/4-inch input. So I personally love the Sennheiser HD 280s. Those are the ones Brian recommended to me, I think over a decade ago, and I've had them ever since. They're awesome. And I think Brian just got a new pair. Shout out to Brian. So obviously my monitors too, you've seen them in all the vids. I'm sure you already have a great pair, but if you're looking for a cool pair, I would look into these, the HS5s. I talked a bit about the Beta 58 in a video recently, if you want to check that out. That's one of my favorite mics. Actually is my favorite mic. I use it pretty much every day for either recording voiceovers or with the 4-track, from live streaming, all sorts of uses for that. And I talk a little bit about how the SM58 I think is the ultimate mic for 4-tracking. It's so useful and utilitarian, and they're everywhere, and they're pretty cheap if you get a used one. I talk about condenser mics a little bit. The AKG C414 is an expensive mic that I invested in a few years back, but any kind of condenser will do. There's so many out there. I like the Rode NT1A too. That was one I used for a while. Australian company, awesome stuff. If you've been with the channel for any length of time, you'll know that the best phantom power for your 4-track is going to be using the R-Tube MP. I actually have 3 of these. I think I might try this new one too. There's a new version that has an output limiter, which I think could be really cool for slamming some drums, or slamming some drums into that limiter. Could be cool. We'll have to see. That could be a cool future video. But if you need phantom power, these are the best way to do it. I'd like to actually make a device that could hook up to the 4-track that just had phantom power and maybe a pad or something. It would be cool to make something that like plugs into the back of the 4-track standalone device that would, enhance whatever you're plugging in. I think that could be cool. These also have phase reverse, so if you're tracking drums with multiple mics, that's something I mentioned in the mono drum tutorial video. Really important to understand phase when you're recording with multiple mics on any source, really. There's also plus 20 decibel boost and the output limiter. And there's some, I think I mentioned that in the phase reverse, yeah. There's 4 different uses for it. It's awesome on bass too, but I'll let you check it out and read it when you get a chance. Another thing with 4-tracking is the submixer, which is really cool. I've always used a second 424 because I have a few of them. But the sub input is really versatile, and you can do things like set up mics on a drum kit and then mix that down to mono and just record it to one of the tracks, or have a stereo mix of your drums and send it to the master fader via the sub input. Really cool use for a second mixer, and highly recommended to get one if you don't have one. You probably have one lying around. I personally like the ones that have faders on them, like the 424. But definitely a cool piece of gear to pick up if you're looking for to add inputs to your sessions, or you have a few different people recording with you, or you want to record drums and not have to bounce them, or you want to record everybody at the same time. You could record your drums in mono or record them in stereo, and then you have 2 tracks left over. Or you could have other people and instruments, like somebody playing guitar, and they have their vocals on another submixer and plug that in to one of the tracks. There's a lot of uses for the submixer. So 4-track bouncing is another one. The UMC 404 HD, that's the one I've been using. I made a video about it. Should probably make some more videos on that. That's a pretty cool, cost-effective solution. That's actually what I said right here. Ben actually turned me onto these in one of the streams, I think last year. He had, I think the 202, I don't know if that's the proper name, but he had one that was 2 inputs, and I was blown away by it. And I actually got this one thinking I would return it. I just wanted to check it out, make a video on it, and I kept it because it's great for streaming. And it has the 4 inputs, so it's really easy to bounce all 4 tracks or bounce a stereo mix. The Focusrite Scarlett, that's another one I used to have. I think I gave it to or sold it to Sean. He needed an interface at one point, so I sent him this one. It's pretty awesome. I think I just had a couple different interfaces laying around, so I decided to move that one along. But the overload lights weren't always accurate on it, I found. And to be honest, it sounds, I haven't A-B'd these two, but they basically do the same thing, and the preamps are great on the Behringer, so I think this one's like twice the price. So this is always something that people email me about, and I wanted to finally get it done. There's a few different videos online about this too, but these are like the cables you're going to want. The Hosa Stereo RCA to 1/4 inch mono, this is the one I use all the time, the one I use the most. And then the stereo breakout is really useful too for recording different things. And of course, here's one that I want to get, and I probably would have gotten it if I didn't have all these Hosa RCA cables. But there's an RCA Snake that basically gives you 8. It's basically 4 of these. So I pretty much have 4 of these, so I don't really need it, but it would be cool to grab one. And RCA Snake would be great. RCA to 1/4 inch Snake, that's like exactly what you would need. So I want to check that out too, because I like all the colors on it. Here's probably the only thing you may ever need if you have all this stuff. If you have a headphone that only has an 1/8 inch input, but this is definitely, or output rather, but this is definitely a must-have. I would grab a couple of these if you don't already have them. They come in handy all the time. These sort of low Z to high Z impedance matchers, I've never had any good experiences with. That's not to say this one is bad, but they always seem to break. And they're mostly more useful if you have like an original 424, which is something I mentioned here. But I think you're pretty much always better off grabbing a tube MP at that point. I added the Behringer cable tester because that's something when I'm recording I use probably every time I record. I pull this out, and it's one of those things that you'll be happy you have around when you have to diagnose an issue, especially with the 4-track. You can test RCA cables, XLR, 1/4 inch. There's even 1/8 inch. It's awesome, and it shows you via some lights if there's any bad connections and things. And the test tone is great too, because you can play that through some of the channels. Actually, that's how Jay diagnosed the issue I had a few years back, was with his cable tester, and he would send the test tone through to see if it's appearing on the channel or coming through the channel. So definitely a good piece of kit to have around. And you'd be surprised, when a cable goes bad, or cables can just, I've had cables that were plugged in for years, and all of a sudden some device didn't work, and I go to test the cable, and that's what it was. So I don't know, it's definitely a good piece of gear to have, and they're not too expensive, and it's something you'll use pretty much, I think, every time you go to record. I just do it out of habit now. This compressor is pretty cool. I used to have one, but I had to sell it. But there's a lot of videos online about it if you want to check it out. The Pro VLA2, not to be confused with the MPA2, which is like a microphone preamp from Art. But this is a great compressor, especially if you want to do outboard mastering or just any kind of compression for sources. And then I have a couple pedals that I like to use. I've used in some of the effects videos. They're really cool. The Boss DM2, which is awesome, and the EHX Holy Grail, both great pedals for vocals. And the Holy Grail, even though it's digital, it has a really good, I don't think, it's hard to tell that it's digital. It sounds analog to me, but I used to have a big box version, and that version, if you look for one of the old ones, it definitely, the power supply on it is strange, and it will definitely make some noise sometimes if you have it hooked up with other pedals. So that's actually why I eventually sold mine, but I've been meaning to get another one. But I mean, I have other ways to do reverb too, so, but I'd like to get another one of those. Those are pretty cool. And the DM2 is great. It's just around the same vintage, and it's just awesome. You know, it's like a really warm analog delay, which is sick. Last but not least, I got some mic stands here. Just a quick note about those, you know. It helps to have good mic stands when you're doing all this stuff, even though they tend to wear out eventually. I have a couple that I bought a vintage one at a yard sale, and that's clearly like probably 40 or 50 years old. It's an old Atlas Sound stand. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so that's my list. If you have any ideas or comments about the list, let me know. Let me know if there's anything I should add to it. I think with all this stuff, you'll be ready to hit the 4-track. And yeah, my battery came on here. Low battery. All right, I guess I should get going. Thanks for watching, and share the list with people if they're looking for 4-track tips. So that's my list. You can check it out at 424recording.com. Thanks for watching today. Happy 4-tracking. And special thanks to Steve, Jody, Andrew, Patty, Will, Matt, Devin, James, and all my patrons over at patreon.com/424recording. Make sure you do something you want to do today, all right?